22nd place, and as my final relegation spot, I've then gone for Huddersfield.
I've gone for Huddersfield in 23rd.
I think Huddersfield are getting relegated. I think they will go down 22nd. I'm sorry, guys.
I could see Huddersfield having a real struggle this season and possibly going down.
Huddersfield are currently second in the Championship. How on earth has this happened? Guys, welcome back to another video on the channel. Now, I've been meaning to do this video for quite some time because Huddersfield Town are in the middle of having an absolutely unbelievable season where they're currently second in the Championship when absolutely everyone on YouTube at the start of the season either had them to go down or finish right near the bottom of the table. So in today's video, we're going to be doing a bit of a deeper dive into Huddersfield this season, Carlos Corberan, how he's managed to turn the tide around there compared to last season. I'd love to get your guys' input on this one in the comments down below as well, and if you'd like to see me do a deeper dive into any other Championship clubs who've had some interesting stories come out this season, make sure to leave a like and do get your suggestions down below. So before we dive into this season, let's first of all go over a little bit of context. So Huddersfield spent 2 seasons in the Premier League before they were relegated back down to the Championship. The 19/20 season highlighted just how poorly they'd actually planned out their relegation. Jan Siewert was in charge of just 3 Championship matches before he was ultimately fired. Danny Cowley then came in, kept them up, and Huddersfield finished 18th that season, although it did feel like there was a little bit of an over-reliance on Carl and Grant within that setup that season. It was clear that Danny Cowley wasn't part of the future, and so heading into next season they went ahead and made that managerial change with Carlos Corberan coming in. Now, it's important to note that despite Huddersfield being a parachute team during this side, those funds weren't exactly being pumped into the 11. They were very much dealing with a restricted transfer budget, with the majority of deals they were doing around this time on free transfers and undisclosed deals for low transfer fees. But things started off fairly positively for Carlos Corberan. For the first half of the season, they mostly spent it in and around mid-table before the second half of the season when they really started to slump and concede goals at an alarming rate, ultimately going ahead and finishing 20th in the league. And so heading into this season, and like you saw at the start of the video, the vast majority of people had Huddersfield down to really struggle this season. I have to admit, I saw them going down, but they now found themselves second in the Championship, albeit the teams below them do have games in hand on them, but also on a 16-game unbeaten streak. So what has actually changed with Huddersfield this season? Well, as you can see on the left-hand side, we've got Huddersfield's most used 11 from last season, and beneath me, we've got Huddersfield's most successful 11 so far this season, and we already get the idea of just how much has actually changed at Huddersfield during the summer transfer window. So first of all, if we talk about systems, a large part of why they were conceding so many goals last season was the transition to a new style of play often left them really quite vulnerable. I remember Preston going to Huddersfield last season, and it was a great match in the end. In the end, it became a little bit of a basketball match with how Huddersfield would bomb on with their fullbacks, you know, Harry Toffolo and Pippa, probably 2 of their best players from last season, especially in that first half of the season when at times they were actually playing some decent football under Corberan. But those overloads in the attacking areas would often leave them quite exposed at the back, and particularly with, you know, defenders like Richard Keogh and Naby Sarr, who aren't particularly great with defending 1v1 situations. With their fullbacks left committed forward, it would often leave them quite vulnerable at the back, and then with an inexperienced goalkeeper behind them in Ryan Schofield, that also didn't exactly help things. Moving over to this season then, and like we've seen with quite a few Championship clubs over the past season or two, we've seen them transition into a back three, and I think that this has suited them much better. Now, we'll get to talking about the recruitment and the actual players that have changed within this system, but what this allows Huddersfield to do is still maintain that width with their fullbacks in Harry Toffolo and Sorba Thomas now, who's been an absolute revelation for them in that position. But what it also does is it gives them more defensive stability with having that extra centre half in there, and they've also gone ahead and massively improved the personnel. If we look at those 2 wide centre halves in Matty Pearson and especially Levi Colwill, who's been absolutely brilliant, their abilities at defending 1v1 situations in wide areas from wingers who are looking to cut inside, I think are a massive step up on what they had in those positions last season. After that though, if we actually go ahead and circle the players that have actually stayed the same from last season to this season in terms of these two 11s here, we've seen a massive overhaul of this squad. So only 3 of their most used players from last season make it into their most successful 11 at the moment. Those 3 players being Harry Toffolo, Lewis O'Brien and Jonathan Hogg. Apart from that, we've seen massive changes going on within this Huddersfield squad, and I think because of that refresh, I mean, that's one large contributing factor which is playing into this current balance that they're having from last season. We spoke about the system change, and we'll crunch a few numbers on that and talk about statistically how they've actually improved from a defensive shape. But recruitment-wise and man-for-man, comparing the new players who have come in compared to who they were replacing for last season, I think we're seeing obvious improvements here. Now, all of these signings weren't guaranteed hits at the start of the season, and this was one of the reasons why I think quite a few people were still a little bit cautious with predicting Huddersfield coming into this season, because with the new additions that they made, you know, a lot of sort of loan deals, free transfers and deals on the cheap and things like that, there were still a lot of question marks over these players. But what they have gone ahead and done is gelled brilliantly into a new team and system, and also proved a lot of people wrong. So as an example where the quality has obviously increased over the summer, we'll go for their goalkeeper department, and this by no means is a dig at Ryan Schofield. I think that last season ultimately he was a goalkeeper who was maybe a little bit inexperienced, who was ultimately thrown in at the deep end into a side who concedes a hell of a lot of chances per 90. So last season Ryan Schofield had a save percentage of 70.2%, which would have ranked him as the 14th best goalkeeper in the Championship last season. This season Lee Nichols has come in and had an 80% save percentage, which currently places him as the 2nd best goalkeeper in the league. There's an argument that he's been probably the best goalkeeper in the league so far this season, given that the number 1 spot is Nathan Baxter at Hull, and he's not played a full season for them. But it's not just that the goalkeepers have actually improved, it's the fact that Huddersfield defensively are a lot better set up and coached this season compared to last. Now this graph here was put together by Lou Orns on Twitter. I'd suggest following him. He puts out some good stuff for the Championship in terms of statistical data and things like that. But what this graph shows here is not only the goals prevented from Championship goalkeepers per 90, but also the quality of shots that they're facing. And as we can see, Lee Nichols is the goalkeeper the furthest to the right hand side, which shows that Huddersfield are doing a brilliant job at limiting high quality chances being given up against them, and that was a real sort of problem area for them last season. I can't think back to just how many mistakes, individual basic errors that led to big chances being conceded through, you know, playing out from the back, committing men forward, players being out of positions, individual mistakes and things like that. This right here is a major contributing factor to why they've improved their defensive record so much. So from a defensive standpoint, Huddersfield have massively improved, and that's also reflected with the numbers. Goals conceded per 90 with Lee Nichols in net this season. Huddersfield are averaging 0.88, which is a massive improvement on last season with Ryan Schofield conceding 1.39 goals per 90. But what is very interesting is the shots on target that they're facing per game is pretty much exactly the same from last season. Last season they were averaging 4.1 shots on target against them per 90. This season it's actually slightly increased at 4.12, but like we just saw on that graph, the biggest contributing factor is the fact that they're no longer giving up high quality chances as they were last season, and they're very good now at limiting the opposition to really not a lot in front of goal. You know, we said that in the Championship roundup only a couple of weeks ago where Huddersfield came to Deepdale. We've praised Carlos Corberan for how tactically flexible he's been at different points of the season so far. So that right there, defensively, Huddersfield deserve a massive tick for the season so far. They've been brilliant in that aspect. And then when it comes to the actual goal scoring, Huddersfield have been quite good in this aspect, where the goals have been fairly shared around throughout this squad throughout the season. As we can see on screen here, they've had 15 different goal scorers throughout the year so far, so not too overly reliant on just one player sticking it into the back of the net. Obviously, their top scorer this season, Danny Ward, who wasn't really featured all too much last season, only found the back of the net once for them, but he's found a real vein of form, hitting 11 so far this season. Sinani's obviously come in and added quality. Dwayne Holmes has had his moment so far this season as well. To be honest, the one player who probably hasn't done it as much as I thought he would this season, and not quite had the influence on this team that I thought he would, is probably Josh Koroma. You know, last season he was was very much their danger man, then got that injury and missed a chunk of the season, and since, dare I say it, maybe hasn't quite been his usual self. Don't get me wrong, he's certainly had moments throughout this season, but that's probably all they've been, moments, and we've not quite seen it on that consistent basis that we thought. He's been out recently with an illness for them, but still an abundance of potential there. And yeah, like I say, not too overly reliant on one player sticking it into the back of the net. If we then look at the assist, we see here the obvious pattern, all the creativity coming from their wing backs bombing up and down the pitch. Sorba Thomas, who has been the bargain of the century, if I'm being completely honest. 3 goals, 10 assists. We then got Harry Toffolo with 1 goal and 7 assists as well. In terms of the main chance creator in this team, I think that this sums it up perfectly well, to be honest with you. Sorba Thomas with 72 key passes throughout the season. Then we've got a lot of other contributors coming in from midfield. So Lewis O'Brien, who's also absolutely fantastic. We praised him a lot throughout last season, even when Huddersfield were struggling at times. And I think that in a more consistent side with better players around him, he's only gone on to shine more throughout this season as well. But he's up there, Sonani, Harry Toffolo with 26 as well. We also then have the likes of Corberan and Dwayne Holmes as well. Set pieces have been another massive asset for Huddersfield so far this season, scoring from 15 this year. Only Fulham have done better from them. So this season's improvement from Huddersfield has been a little bit of everything, to be honest with you. I think that a large part of it has been quite savvy recruitment. It hasn't been a case of Huddersfield being bankrolled and then, you know, splurging loads of cash during the summer transfer window. They've been quite concise with the deals that they've done, and they've done it on really quite a shoestring budget if we're comparing it to some of the other big hitters of the Championship like Fulham and Bournemouth per se. And I think at the end of the day we probably have to give Huddersfield quite a bit of credit for sticking with the project under Corberan. I remember times, you know, earlier on, even in this season, certainly towards the end of last season, when we were saying, you know, Corberan just doesn't look cut out for this job. They're conceding too many goals. They've been too sloppy in too many areas. And going into next season, it looks like it's going to be a bit of a disaster for them. But their perseverance in sticking to the project and believing, you know, from what they saw early on, has more than been rewarded throughout this season. Do I think they'll make the top 2? Probably not. I mean, they could even slip out of the top 6, you know, with how close that's going to be. If you watch the projection we did earlier on last week, make sure to go ahead and check that one out. But that had Huddersfield missing out on the top 6, finishing on 75 points on goal difference. So at the end of the season, it's going to be incredibly tight. And for whatever the rest of the season may hold for Huddersfield, make no mistakes about it, this has been a massive achievement, whatever happens from now on in. And we all know that expectations change throughout the season, and Huddersfield obviously now have their hearts set on a top 6 finish, but it's a club which is moving in the right direction, and compared to where they were immediately after their relegation from the Premier League, they look a hell of a lot better in terms of a setup for returning to the Premier League than they did just a few years ago. But there we have it, guys. That will wrap it up for today's video. If you did enjoy today's deeper dive into Huddersfield, make sure to leave a like on this video and get your comments down below if you'd like to see me take a deeper dive into any other Championship teams or players. I quite enjoy doing these videos. But as always, guys, if you did enjoy, do leave a like and do stick around and subscribe for some regular Championship content. Apart from that, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.